It's weekly download time. It's weekly download time. It's weekly download time. Oh yeah, it's download time. It's weekly download time. And now we're going to learn some stuff about procrastination. So I was procrastinating on cutting my Christmas beard, and I was about to do it because we had the big showcase today. And then I was like, you know what? I think if I'm going to teach a class about procrastination, I got to keep it around. Shows I have some authority in discussing the matter of procrastination. So I'm a master procrastinator. I do not amateur procrastinate. I procrastinate every single time. I procrastinate on all kinds of things. On, you know, doing taxes, on booking flights, on all kinds of stuff. But I do not procrastinate on music. Not anymore. I used to procrastinate on music a lot. I knew that it mattered so much to me, and I wanted to get it right. I wanted to really, do it justice. If I was going to put something out, I didn't want it to be whack. I didn't want it to be half-assed. I didn't want it to feel contrived. I didn't want it to feel trite. I didn't want it to be forgettable or boring. I wanted it to express some kind of deep truth about life, the universe, and everything all in one perfect song. And I made myself so busy without getting anywhere. And I learned a lot about myself in that battle with procrastination. And I've learned a lot about procrastination from teaching. Many of the people that I teach, that's their main problem. So this weekly download it's been a long time coming. It's been a popular request, and it's been a long time coming. And I figured that, with us coming into the new year, that this would be the time to really focus on this, to really do it justice. So I did a weekly download last week about my practice of goal setting and New Year's resolutions and some of the things that have helped me to make and keep New Year's resolutions. So you should definitely check that out. And then also this week, in addition to the finale of the Dojo TV House Party 2021 season, we're also celebrating 50 releases on the Producer Dojo label. Thank you very much, Alexander and DJ Shaky. That was a fantastic set at the live show. And also, your release is awesome. It's a great record. I'm really excited about it. I'm really proud of you guys. I'm really proud of Cheryl Kelby and MadLab as well. Really fantastic sets, really fantastic releases. I'm really excited for 2022. We've got a whole lot of good things coming up. And I feel like with touring opening up and everything again, and like it's time to get back to it. And this Omicron thing is kind of like the last bit of COVID, and there's these new vaccines out that like are not variant dependent that they're testing. So it's really not going to be long before we're back. And there's a lot to be really excited about in the future. It's not all capitalism eating itself and brutal grinding cyberpunk dystopia. There's a lot of good coming, and a lot of really exciting things in technology, a lot of really exciting things in music, and a lot of really exciting things in the dojo. So there's so much to look forward to, and there's so much to work for. But when you care a lot about doing something, sometimes, even though you want to do that thing more than anything else, you just find yourself doing something else, right? So procrastination is putting off what is important, even when you know that's not the right thing to do. Even when you know it's harmful to put off the important thing, you do it anyways. So why do we do this? What drives people to do this? Why do artists especially do this? How can we face this? How can we get through it, right? Well, there's several reasons to procrastinate, and most of them come down to your subconscious and your emotional state. Okay, so we like to think that we're these perfect, rational beings where everything that we do makes sense and we have reasons for all of our actions. But, when you actually study the brain with a lot of decision making, especially when you study people who are really good at things, like, for example, video games. If you study someone who's like really good at video games, they can basically kind of like offload, because the conscious mind, right? It's slow. It was one of the last things to evolve. The frontal cortex, especially, that's where all of your like kind of social programming lives. All of the stuff that makes you a pack animal and not a violent criminal all lives in your frontal lobe mostly. And that's why, a lot of people who have frontal lobe injuries can become violent after suffering frontal lobe injury. But this is like an evolutionarily new area of the brain. The hindbrain and the brain stem and stuff, we share a lot of those same brain areas with lizards and, other seemingly primitive organisms, evolutionarily old school organisms. So that kind of base of the brain is often called the reptile brain or the lizard brain, and that's because it was very early to evolve. And if you study people who are really like, expert drivers, experts at video games, and you measure their decision making, you'll find that a lot of the decisions, they don't have time to go to the frontal cortex and mull around and be like, oh, what's my mom gonna think? What's how am I gonna look? How we blah 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 blah. All that social crap is important for making you not a criminal and being a compassionate person and stuff. But when you are trying to play a video game and you need to react quickly, you don't have time for all that. So the decisions are made in the brainstem. And when you measure the decision making, a lot of the people who get really good at things, get really fast at things, they've kind of, that you start by learning these things with like your frontal cortex, but with practice, they go down into the brainstem and you think less and less and less. But when you ask people about these decisions that are made so quickly that they do not populate to the conscious part of the brain, people will still describe their decision-making process as though they were aware of every single step. Okay? So when you measure the electrical chemical signals, the salt and potassium and stuff flying around the neurons, you measure the electrical activity that's generated by that. You can see in the MRI machine, you can see the decision happening, and then later going to the frontal cortex where it has become a conscious thing that you're aware of. Right? And this means that, Asha's trying to break it. This means that, we have an illusion of conscious decisions when much of the time, especially with things that are habitual, much of the time that decision is happening in other areas of the brain that are not subject to conscious awareness. Right? So, as much as it feels like we have total free will and control of all of our actions, a lot of that is actually us rationalizing our decision making after the fact. Okay? And this is, if you look this up, there's tons of research about this. This is totally real. We make decisions unconsciously, and then our conscious mind cannot penetrate the depths of the subconscious. So the conscious mind will rationalize our unconscious decisions and give us a narrative, because narrative is how we understand meaning and it's how we understand the world. So when you look at the science behind this, you will realize that, yes, there is an experience of having free will, but much of your decision making is unconscious. Much of your decision making is automatic. And when you can recognize that the unconscious mind has a central role in your behavior, you can start to create strategies that can deal with it. But when you don't acknowledge that the unconscious mind is making seemingly conscious decisions for you, you're going to be at a loss for control of your behavior. Because when the subconscious, when you don't acknowledge it and you don't strategize to deal with it, and you don't allow for that factor to exist, you don't allow for the reality of that, you cannot gain conscious control over your subconscious. You have to accept that your subconscious and your unconscious mind has a central role in your behavior. So if we want to regulate the behavior of the unconscious mind, if we want to regulate the behaviors of our reflexes, etc., it's up to the conscious mind to outsmart the unconscious automatic mind, because that is how you actually exert control over this. You need to outsmart your reptile brain. So thinking of the brain, I think Buddhism really kind of got a lot of this stuff right, like early on, where, Buddhism teaches us that you're not your thoughts, you're not your brain, that there are many different forces operating inside the brain that are like part of being embodied and that are not necessarily you, right? And if you've ever seen that Pixar movie, oh, what was it called? With all the little, there's like they show it to people who have like the kids who are having mental health problems. There's that Pixar movie where they're all the little colored characters are inside of. Hang on, let's see, Pixar mental health. Oh, I forget what that movie was called. Inside Out. If you watch that movie Inside Out really exemplifies this, and a lot of the the ancient Greeks, they had a lot of ideas about the mind that were like this. The word genius, for example, comes from the word genie, which is not inside of you. The genie is like a separate, interdimensional being, like a spirit or whatever, that you kind of channel and tap into, and instead of to bring in things that are genius. And you wouldn't say someone was a genius, you would say they had a genius, and they had this spirit that they could tap into with their mind, there was like a channel to that genie in that person's mind. Likewise, the Greek concept of a daemon is very similar. A daemon, it's where you get like demos or like I'm pretty sure the word for democracy comes with that. But a daemon is basically like a spirit that also, it's like kind of like a genie that would like interface with your mind, and you'd have like you often hear Socrates talking about the whispers of his daemon, which is giving him different messages or giving him advice or intuitions or whatever. And the Greeks, they allowed for this. They allowed for these multiple compartmentalized levels of self that are at war inside of the psyche. Sometimes they're harmonious, sometimes they are at war. And when a person is having mental health problems, often there are kind of like aspects of self that are not operating in a harmonious way, right? They're not operating in a harmonious way. So really, when you're trying to gain control of impulsive or short-sighted behavior, you need to basically train your unconscious mind that deferred gratification is preferable to instant gratification. Right? And this is like, as a parent, this is one of the biggest things that you have to teach your child is deferred gratification, because, an animal like a dog or whatever, it just wants to eat and lie around and have sex and, like poop wherever it wants and whatever, and like those urges are great if you're a dog. Like if you're a dog and you can lie around and fuck other dogs and eat whatever you want and poop wherever you want, you're sweet. You're winning at life. Like that's a great life. That's a great dog life, right? But human life is more complicated. Human life has this social dimension that lives up in the frontal cortex that it's our job not to repress our animal urges, but rather to harmonize the aspects of our being and bring them under conscious control. Okay? So there are different strategies that you can use for this. But I think the best starting place, if you're having a problem with procrastination, the best starting place, in my opinion, is to pay attention to your emotions. Okay, pay attention to your emotions. And this is something that, like, especially in Western cultures, it's kind of treated like, especially for men, that men are just like, they don't have emotions and they're just, these rational beings and you just stiff upper lip and power through and suck it up, buttercup, oh, you're a man, and it's just like, it's so toxic, this idea that men should not acknowledge or pay attention to their emotions is totally toxic. And, I think that's where that movie Inside Out really gets it right, because the different emotional aspects of the character, who's, they go inside the person's head and there's like different colored emotion daemons that are basically driving this person's behavior. These different emotions are kind of like the motivating forces that shape our behavior. And when you repress your emotions and you don't pay attention to them and you don't acknowledge their reality, their hold on your behavior is going to be that much stronger because you can't see the ways in which they are controlling you, right? And it's like, it's like if you want to create a perfect system of control for a society, you need to build a prison with invisible bars. That was just a great metaphor I heard in this like totally goofy presentation, but it was like, if you're trying to control society and everybody knows that they're in prison, eventually they're going to rise up against your control. But if you can create a subtle level of control such that the bars of the prison are invisible, then that level of control can go on indefinitely. And it's kind of like the 1984 dystopia versus the Brave New World dystopia. And if you kind of examine which of those books came more true, it depends on where you are. If you're in if you're a Uyghur in China, definitely some 1984 shit. But those of us lucky enough to be living in, liberal democracies, we have something much more akin to the dystopia presented by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, where we are controlled through pleasure and through our desires rather than through force, right? So really paying attention to your emotions, acknowledging their reality, and recognizing that you are not your emotions is, I think, the first step. Because, anything that you can experience is not self. Anything that you can be aware of is not self. And as you think deeper and deeper about what the self is, you'll find out that the self is essentially a vantage point. The eye cannot see itself. The eye, it is essentially a vantage point. And when you practice things like mindfulness meditation, or even just read about them, you can learn to basically disidentify with these different emotions and disidentify with these different thoughts, and then you will become less a prisoner of their influence, right? So I think one of the first things you can do is that you should do is, just cut yourself some slack to start with, because we have these kind of really toxic, loaded ideas of what it is to be a procrastinator, right? We think of procrastinators as lazy. We think of them as people who don't get anything done. We think of them as childish or immature. We think of them as just like, often we dismiss the procrastinators as though they do not contribute to society. But if you study the lives of great creative people, especially, many of the most important minds to the creation of all of the progress of the human race have been procrastinators. Okay? That's people work differently, and creative people oftentimes have trouble with getting up early in the morning and following fucking rules that they don't like, and being told what to do and keeping schedules, and they're just like, usually they're just not the bean counter type, and this is kind of like often very true in the arts community, even more than the general creative community, because you can be like a creative person and work in like marketing, and like that requires a great deal of creativity. Are you in the arts? Kind of, but not really, right? So, in the arts especially, this is true. And I'm a procrastinator. I've made my peace with it, and I don't feel like acknowledging that label is an invalidation of any of my contributions to society at all. And frankly, I don't really judge the moral worth of other people based on their contributions to society, because people are born with different capacities. And to me, like the moral worth of a person, if you're going to judge a person's moral worth, it really comes down to one virtue, and that is compassion. How does that person treat those from which they have nothing to gain? All right? And like, if someone is like mean to a house pet or whatever, I'm just like, yo, fuck that person. I don't need to know that person. Like, I remember I was hanging out with a DJ friend of mine, and he had this roommate who was like so hot, like just ridiculous. She's one of those people who's just like won the genetic fucking lottery, like just off the charts hot. And I was producing a track with him at his house, and she had like, this like perfect, like fluffy little princess life and shit, and this little like Pomeranian. And she told us that, she would go out partying and just like put a open bag of food in the room with the Pomeranian and just like lock the door and just go out and do drugs for like 3 days. And I was just like, her hotness just evaporated like instantly. Like, I was just like, yo, this person is not fucking cool. I can't even believe you live with this girl. Like, what the fuck is wrong with her? So it's like, I think if you're like, oh, I'm not productive or whatever, like, different people, like it's not all about how productive you are. It's not all about how talented you are. It's not all about how skilled you are. No one's born knowing everything. No one's born good at everything. And like some people, like I have this one friend, like Ionize, who I'm sure he's in the dojo. Ionize is one of those motherfuckers who's just like 10 out of 10 on everything he does. You're just like, what? Like, how do you get so good at things like instantly, And he's just gifted like that. Like, he's just born genetically with this like crazy brain where he can like figure anything out and be amazing at it, And it's like a good deal of that is, granted, he has like, a very good willpower, and he reads a lot and is very good at like organizing his self and getting his self harmonious. But some people are just like insanely effective at things, and that's not like, did that. That's just how it is. That's how it is. There's like a bell curve distribution for everything. Every possible trait, there's a bell curve distribution. And, a good deal of that, you're just born there, But like, I have like one of my friends growing up, we had Down syndrome, and he's like the sweetest, coolest dude. And I don't know if he ever did that much that was productive, but he was so rad and like fun to be with, So like, if you are nice and you treat other people well, especially people from which you have nothing to gain, that should give you some confidence. That should give you a reason to cut yourself some slack when you're trying to do all this shit that is ostensibly hard. Like, making music is a hard thing to do. There's lots of details. There's lots of stuff. It's one of those amazing areas of life that you can just keep working at and working at and working at. And no matter how much work you put in, there's always more to learn. You can always be better. You're always a student. Your entire career in the music industry, you're always a student. You're always learning. And the people who get the best are not the people who are like, I'm fucking amazing, I don't have to try anymore, like, I'm so awesome at this, whatever, like, everything I do is great. Those people are not the best. And I was talking to Edit today from the Glitch Mob. I hadn't caught up with him in a while. We were talking about like live modular. One of my New Year's resolutions is live modular on stage by the summer. And I was talking to Edit, and he was telling me that he is a huge fan of Baphometrics from the dojo and checks out her YouTube all the time. And it's like, oh, her video on gain staging that she just did, like that finally made a whole bunch of things click for me. And like, that's awesome. Thanks for teaching Baphometrics. So Edit, who's someone who has long been like one of my just like pedestal hero, amazing, top musicians in life. Like, I was like, the first time I met Edit, I was like shaking. I was so nervous. I love like that Crying Over Prose album changed my life, And here's Edit studying from one of my students. That is the attitude that people who are truly excellent in music have. You're always a student. There's always more to learn. There's always different things that you can, there's new ways of thinking about fundamental concepts. Like, Edit has done thousands of mixdowns, and he's still learning new ways to think about the fundamentals, right? That's the attitude that you need to have. So if you're going around beating yourself up because you're not the best at everything, that's fucked up, right? And just imagine like you're, I gotta straighten my hat. There we go. My hat's straight. But yeah, imagine like when you say these things to yourself that are like negative things to yourself, because people say fucking terrible shit to themselves all the time, right? When you catch yourself saying these things, you should ask yourself, like, would I say that to like one of my friends, right? Like, would I tell one of my friends, you suck at this, you're never going to be any good at this, no matter how hard you work, you'll never be as good as anyone you love, you should just give up? Would you say that to someone that you care about? Would you say that to that person? And the answer is, fuck no, you wouldn't. You'd be the asshole if you said that kind of shit to someone else. So why the fuck do you say shits like that to yourself all the time? Okay? Don't. It's pathological. When you catch yourself with self-talk like that, you got to cut yourself some slack. You got to be like, hey, whatever. Nobody's born knowing everything. And it's really important to always be learning new things. And if you have a block where you're afraid of the emotional consequences of admitting that you don't know everything, you're going to become ideologically rigid. You're not going to be able to be flexible in your thinking, and you're going to become traumatized by the inevitable collision of inflexible ideological rigidity with the reality of the world. And that is actually what the word trauma means. Is not just an injury, but it is an injury from the unexpected. Trauma is when your mental map of the world is inadequate and you are violently forced to face that fact. That's why trauma is so much worse than just an injury, right? That's why trauma has a psychological component to it, is because that's what it means. It means your mental map of the world has collided with reality. Your insufficient mental map of the world has collided with reality and you have suffered pain from this. That's what trauma is, right? So like the French, right? They have these two words for the future that I think are particularly good to think about, right? On the one hand, you have un futur, which means like, just the normal mundane future. Like let's go meet for coffee at a coffee shop on Wednesday at 1 p.m. That would be un futur. And then there's l'avenir. And l'avenir is the inevitable coming of the unknowable other. The inevitable coming of the unknowable other. And I wrote a paper about this when I was in this course, this psychology course. And the thing that the metaphor, the visual metaphor that I explored in this paper was this YouTube video that I saw of this baby that was like born with just no face, like no face at all. And she needed like 17 surgeries by the time she was like 1 year old. And seeing her parents, like the way that the different parents, like their kind of ways of processing it really showed a lot about human psychology and the narratives that we develop to deal with reality. And because, I mean, Mother Nature has a cold fucking hand, man. She really does. So if you're going to prepare yourself for l'avenir, the inevitable coming of the unknowable other, you need to prepare yourself for trauma. You need to be ready for trauma, right? So how do we make ourselves ready for trauma, the unknown, the real unknown? How? Because we're going into the unknown. When you are exploring music, your craft, etc., it's much safer, and you're probably not going to have a baby without a face, but there are unknown unknowns. How do you prepare for unknown unknowns? Because that is what we have to do as students, and that is like kind of the slack that we need to be able to cut ourselves. And slack is kind of a great metaphor because it reminds me of the Taoist story where there's storms, and in a storm, if a big old tree is rigid and stiff and it breaks in a storm, a big old tree, it will be strong. You'd want to use it to like build stuff, but it will break in a storm because it's old and it's rigid. Whereas the saplings and the bamboo can handle the monsoon, right? So the monsoon is coming in your life, but also, to an extent in your music. And if you are rigid and you are inflexible and you are afraid of bending with the wind, you will snap. You will not be prepared to be a good student of life and you will not have the flexibility required for the inevitable coming of the unknowable other. Okay? So that's as much of a reason as I can give you why you should cut yourself some slack, right? If you're kind, if you treat those from which you have nothing to gain well, and you're kind, and you try to be good, you make an effort, a mindful effort to be good, that moral worth is enough. If you do that consciously through your life, that is enough. Anyone who judges you for what you're capable of, or like whether you know everything about music, their opinion is fucking bullshit. Okay? That has nothing to do with your moral worth. That has nothing to do with your moral worth as a person, right? So understand that. That's the reason, the rational reason to cut yourself some slack. Understand that, okay? And recognize that the fear of being deemed worth less because of some kind of a shortcoming that is anything other than a moral failing. Like, you should be afraid of becoming a sadistic asshole. That's definitely something you should fear and be, because that will cause problems. That will definitely, like, if you are a piece of shit and you treat other people shitty all the time, you should be worried about that. But if you are kind and a decent person and you make an effort and you make an effort to expand your thinking and to really understand reality on its own terms, that's enough. That's enough that you should be proud. You should be a proud person. You should feel validated. Okay? So then, when you know that, right, then you can approach the unknown unknowns with less fear of what other people think. Because what other people think, if they're judging you on things that are not accurate, their opinion doesn't fucking matter. Like, when I go outside with my dogs, their criteria for, what makes me a good person or not is completely fucking different. Like, I wonder what they think when I pick up my dog's shit on the street. They're probably like, why the fuck is he doing that? Like, I just shit that there. Like, leave that alone, man. Like, why are you collecting these things? You fucking weirdo. Like, my dog is probably judging me negatively for picking up its shit. But does that matter? Fuck no. No. Like, I should still totally pick up my dog's shit. Like, be conscientious and be a good neighbor. Like, of course, So your other people's opinions, when they're judging you based on criteria that don't fucking matter, their opinions don't fucking matter. Okay? Right. So getting rid of that fear of what other people think, I think, is like the first step. Right? That's the first step. You need to start treating yourself with the same loving kindness that you would treat another person, and stop saying to yourself things that you would never say to someone that you love. Right? And like, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? It all starts with that. You have to be cool with yourself as you are. You have to be cool with yourself as you are. And the people that count love you as you are. Their love is not unconditional. You have to, like, not be a sadistic asshole and not be deceptive and not be like, not violate the social contract. But provided you don't violate the social contract excessively, or if you do, you're at least like charismatic about it, then people, because people cut you a little bit of slack with the social contract, but don't be an asshole. But anyway, so that's step one, right? And then you'll be able to kind of embrace beginner's mind, and to be able to embrace, making yourself a little bit uncomfortable. Because, growth and deferred gratification is all about being able to sustain discomfort. Right? Being able to sustain discomfort. And I've mentioned this before in some of the classes, but I think it bears repeating that our concept of being gifted in Western cultures is totally toxic. It's fucked up and not cool. Okay, so our kind of ideas, a lot of our ideas about like being gifted in school and stuff, and like what makes a gifted student, is actually based in eugenics, which you may recognize from such hits as the KKK and the Third Reich and phrenology. Eugenics is not real science, but racists like it a lot. And it's really validating for people who are the ruling class, and they want to be like, okay, well, God says that, all men are created equal or whatever, but like, we got to own slaves, and like, how do we rationalize this? There must be some scientific reason. Let's measure the bumps on people's heads. And like, if you have a lump here, you're more, whatever. And like, so anytime you see like skull measuring, like phrenology, stay the fuck away. And the ideas, a lot of these ideas of eugenics have unfortunately kind of permeated a lot of our cultural institutions in the West, specifically education. So our education system kind of says like, hey, this student was born better than this student. So because they're like genetically superior, even though they maybe don't work as hard, we need to give them extra resources. And these students who are like, born worth less, we should give less resources to. And their idea of being gifted is like, you're genetic. And that's why they're always doing all these fucking IQ tests all the time, right? It's because IQ tests are basically, they're Western society's attempt to figure out how genetically intelligent someone is so that they can, invest more or less resources in them, right? So in Asian cultures, they don't have this problem. Their idea of when people are gifted, right? Their idea of when people are gifted is measured by the ability to sustain discomfort in pursuit of a goal, aka grit. Okay? Grit. Not genetics, but grit is what makes you gifted in Asian societies. And this is one of many reasons why Producer Dojo is a dojo. And there is an expressly kind of, martial arts / Asian kind of angle to a lot of the philosophical concepts that are taught in the dojos, and one of many reasons. But in Asian classes, they don't, they when they're putting people to the test is how they handle pressure. Pressure is the test, not pattern recognition or test taking, right? Because you can get really good at test taking. Like there are places where you could, like, let's say you really want to get into Mensa, right? If you go and study how to take IQ tests, you can get good at taking IQ tests and then take it and, get into Mensa. If you have to be a bit smart, but if you get good at taking IQ tests, you can do better on IQ tests. But grit is something that it's like, you need to develop that. And much of the education system in Asia is geared to reward those who can sustain discomfort in pursuit of a goal. And, I think it's really important for you to recognize that, and recognize that if you want to get something that you haven't got before, if you want to get something that you haven't got before, you need to do something that you haven't done before. And your emotional state is like the hindbrain, that reptile brain that controls so much of your behavior I was talking about. That reptile brain, it likes a predictable fucking world, because the reptile brain is not creative. The reptile brain is not rational. It's not creative. It has terrible fucking social skills. And it's, largely a problem, but it keeps you alive and it helps you balance, and it's where your reflexes live and stuff. So, it's not a total wash. But the reptile brain is really it's really kind of impulsive, and it likes things to be predictable, and it likes things to stay the same. And new things are threatening to the reptile brain, right? The reptile brain, just think about it like a puppy dog, you know? It just wants to eat and lie around and fuck and shit wherever it wants. That's what your reptile brain is like, right? That's not necessarily bad if you want to live the puppy dog life, but if you want to live a musician's life, you're gonna have to learn how to control that. So you need to develop your ability to sustain discomfort in pursuit of a goal. You need to develop grit. So how do you develop grit? Okay. Well, I think the thing for me that helps me to develop my own grit and helps me to do things that are uncomfortable or extreme or hard is that I find it meaningful. And humans will do lots of different things for lots of different reasons. But when something is meaningful, or it is something you identify with, that is something that is okay, so there's this guy Maslow. He created this needs hierarchy, right? And it's like this pyramid with your basic needs like food and shelter and not getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers at the bottom, and then it goes up through to your emotional needs, and then at the top is like your need for self-actualization, right? To become your best self. And a lot of people don't get to do that because their circumstances are not very conducive to self-actualization. But if you are living in Western societies, watching this shit on a computer, and you have food to eat and a toilet that flushes, well, congratulations, you're doing way better than most of the fucking world. And I was actually chatting in the chat with our friend in Ottawa who had the same teacher as me, Mr. Kerfuffle, the space employee, who you may recognize from the Discord chat. He had a teacher that I shared with him in high school named Mr. Sarrazin. And Mr. Sarrazin was a specimen of physical health and joviality. He was very charismatic and very friendly and very, he was very witty and just fun to be around. And Mr. Sarrazin, I remember on the first day, Mr. Sarrazin, he was a phys ed teacher, but he was also a substance abuse resource teacher. So he would teach you about health and working out, and he would also teach you about drugs. And I remember Mr. Sarrazin coming in, and the first day he was like, "Oh, I used to do drugs. I used to do them down by the train tracks. Yeah, coke, heroin, man, I did them all. And I remember the day that I found out you had a little bumper right there in your thumb. And I was like, oh man, we don't need spoons no more. We can just do cocaine right off our hands. And I was robbing and stealing and doing all kinds of bad things. And then one day I hit rock bottom and I went to Narcotics Anonymous and I realized, hey, I don't have to live that way. I'm going to make a change. And I made a change. I decided to make a change that day, and I made a change, and I swore I wouldn't do drugs, and I went to rehab, and I started working out, and I got a job, and I'm a picture of health, and I'm doing great, and I'm teaching you today." And I was like, probably supposed to be like, okay, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad, I think was the message. But I was looking at this guy, and I was like, this guy fucked up pretty bad. Like, objectively, he did all the things that you're totally not supposed to do. You know, he did all the things that they're like, don't do this, you'll fuck up your life. He did all that shit. And he's pretty healthy, and he's got friends, and he's got a job, and he's fun to be around. I was like, man, I need to take some more fucking risks. Like, clearly, which is probably not the lesson to learn, but I think it's a good lesson, when you're in a Western society and you have the lower needs on your physiological needs, your safety needs, your belonging and love needs, your esteem needs, your cognitive needs, then you can progress to your aesthetic needs, your self-actualization needs, and your transcendence, which is your spiritual development. So you lucky people, you get to focus on the top levels of the pyramid because you don't have those terrible deficiency needs holding you back. Okay? So, you don't have to, you're not starving. You're not, I mean, some of you probably work jobs you don't like, but you're not working jobs you hate. You're not like no one whips you at work, you know? So, yeah. So, anyway, so, you get to focus, you have the privilege of focusing on your self-actualization. You have the privilege of taking risks. And, um, I just had to mention Mr. Sarrazin because Kerfuffle. Yeah, and Mr. Sarrazin was very kind. Yeah, Kerfuffle too. He was awesome to everyone individually and to the whole class. But yeah, so you can develop grit, right? And a lot of the like when you live a life where your life is really, really comfortable all the time, the tendency is to become very adverse to even a modicum of discomfort. Right. And a lot of the time where the Western kind of model of education, the IQ based idea of being gifted, where that would go astray is you take, usually white kids from rich families who have a very comfortable life. And you'd be like, oh, well, this person, they're doing great because they don't, their parents didn't give them fetal alcohol syndrome and they're not like, huffing paint behind the school. So they're doing great. Yeah, they're clearly gifted. But the problem is you put these people in the real world where they've never done anything that makes them uncomfortable. They don't develop skills properly, right? And like, I remember there's this Doug Stanhope bit where he was like, who do you want working on your car? Some Asian kid who was told they have to work for everything in their life, consulting the manual every step of the way and making certain that they do it correctly? Or do you want some fucking privileged Chad just coming in with the riveting gun going, perfect, nailed it again like I do with everything in my life. All right, let's go. Right? It's, so it's important to develop the ability to sustain discomfort, and a lot of that discomfort is emotional discomfort. So you need to bring what you should do, what you should do, into harmony with what you want to do. Okay, you need to bring what you should do into harmony with what you want to do in the moment. So should is like your overarching way, and then want is like right now, right? So how I have been able to do this is number fucking one. Like my mind was a goddamn mess. When I was first starting to make music, my mind was a goddamn mess. I was just all depression and anxiety and insecurity, and I was making music because I wanted to like impress other people, and my music was all about me, look how good I am. It wasn't about creating a magical fucking world for people to escape to. It was about like, look what I can do. I learned all the fucking functions of this complicated software, And it's like, people don't listen to music because of you. They listen to music because of them. How does it make them feel? Right? That's all they fucking care about. Does your music make them feel good or not? If it's the vibe, they'll put it on. If it's not the vibe, they don't care how fucking skillful it is. Get the fuck out. Doesn't make them feel good. Beat it. Right? So I was all hung up in that kind of mindset. I was all afraid and just making music just fueled by anxiety. I was just so, and it helped me to like fear making mistakes. And so I like rigorously learned a lot of stuff like EQ and mixing and, sound design and stuff like that. It helped me in some ways, but it didn't help me get shit done. Like I was busy as fuck getting nothing done. Like I was skipping all the birthday parties. I was turning down dates. I was like spending all my food money on gear, and like I was living on like $80 food budget a month. Like I would just go buy flour and be like, okay, what can I make with flour? It was insane. Like I was just, everything went to like speakers and computer upgrades and synths and all that. And I was a mess. I was like emotionally, I was a wreck. I was really depressed. Cause I got signed like right away. I was like 19, like just chopping shit up on this crappy like 486 computer that my mom got me from school. It's like hand-me-down computer. And I guess had learned enough from like being in a breakdance crew and everything that I knew what would make people dance. So the label heard that and they were like, okay, well, he'll figure out the mixing and stuff later. Let's get him before anyone else does. And then next thing you know, I'm like fucking 19. I got a record deal. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, you know? So I was terribly anxious and I was a mess. And the thing that got my head together was journaling, man. Journaling, I cannot recommend enough. Okay. And you know, one of the biggest ways to, whether you journal or not, the mantra that I encourage you, like after you've done kind of like the emotional work, the mantra that I encourage you to adopt is write it down, get it done. Write it down, get it done. Okay? There is a power to written goal setting that is unbeatable. Okay, written goal setting is unbeatable. Formalizing your wishes into a fucking plan with deadlines and dates on the calendar. Because you know what? No one's going to make you achieve your dream. No one's going to make you be a musician. We all want you to be a great musician. We all want to be like, damn, you just turned the whole game on its head. Like fucking high fives. We all want that. The only one who doesn't want that is that like demon of fucking inertia. If you ever read the Oatmeal comic, do you know that guy, the Oatmeal? He calls it the bleh, right? And we all have the bleh inside of us, you know? And it's just like, hey, fucking have another beer, watch another episode, fucking sleep in, you know, whatever. Do whatever you can get away with, you know? And that's not like puppy dog, you know? That's not you. That's the bleh. That's the puppy mind. That's the reptile brain. Whatever the fuck you want to call it. The monkey mind. Whatever you want to call it. Stop identifying with that. That's not who you are. Okay? You know, you are the one who sees and the one who makes decisions. You know? And you need to guard against the subconscious mind taking your power away. Because it is very easy to rationalize decisions you make on autopilot, and science has shown us that that's what we all fucking do. Without exception. We all rationalize decisions made on autopilot. That's why my first album was called Autopirate, right? Is because I was, you know, what got me to make that album, Autopirate, was recognizing that there was a pirate inside my mind taking over my decisions. That I had to treat that level of the mind as a demon to be slain. And I slayed it with the pen, the power of the pen. So the journaling exercise that I adopted that made that change in my life was from a book by Julia Cameron, who I actually later learned is James Cameron's wife. That's pretty cool. But she is a creativity expert. And she wrote a book called The Artist's Way. And The Artist's Way is a great book. It's like a 12-week program for helping you to kind of like deal with some of these emotions and like procrastination and getting out of your own way, you know, because we're all our own worst enemy. You know, the greatest obstacle to you doing everything that you want to do as an artist is, of course, yourself. You know, you are the greatest obstacle in your own way. And, you know, I say this again and again and again. It was the first part of the ill methodology. The chapter fucking 1 of the weekly download, lesson 0 in the weekly download, is you got to get your head right. You got to get your emotions right. You got to deal with your insecurities and you got to deal with your demons. And you don't just slay them once and call it a day. Okay? It's an ongoing thing. It's like cleaning your house. You know, you don't just clean your house once and you're like, perfect, I'm Mr. Clean. I never have to clean my house again. Nope. You gotta clean. You got to do your mental housekeeping, tend your garden, or it will be taken over by weeds. So watch the Ill Methodology 1 again if you want more on this. Watch last week's weekly download if you want more on the goal setting aspects of this. But really, like journaling, the morning pages, you just do. I do 2 pages in a moleskin. Like it's the original exercise was 3 pages of like full like lined paper, but I like using a graph paper moleskin because it's like small and fits in my backpack. And then also like in the back, I like draw things and make diagrams and sketches for projects that I'm working on and stuff. So I like the graph paper moleskin, and those lines are fucking crammed. Like there's way more lines on a graph paper moleskin than there are on like foolscap, like you'd write on in elementary school. So, I do 2 pages, no line breaks, no punctuation, never stop to edit. I never fucking read them. And I just dump words onto the page as fast as I possibly fucking can. And the only way to fuck the exercise up is to be slow, right? And what that does is it helps get a lot of your unconscious emotions out where you can see them and deal with them. And it helps you to learn to hit the fucking gas and stop overthinking everything. Because remember, people who are experts at anything, they're making decisions with their hindbrain. But they have trained their hindbrain, right? Because the reptile brain is not necessarily the enemy. It can become your trusty steed that will take you to the mountain, but you need to train it, okay? And to train it, you need to get to know it. Because if you're not aware of, you don't bring the unconscious into the conscious world, its control is invisible and inescapable. So I have found, I just like pump these words out, and I find myself writing all kinds of things. Sometimes when I go really fast, it like starts to rhyme, strangely enough. Sometimes it's stream of consciousness. Sometimes I'm just discussing ways I'm going to rack up my modules, all different kinds of things. But if you're struggling with emotional issues, if you're struggling with substance issues, if you're having trouble sticking to your goals, if you're struggling with procrastination, you can't see yourself write something like, this addiction is killing me. You can only write that so many times before you're like, okay, this is disgusting. Like, I'm acknowledging the fact that this addiction is killing me every day, again and again and again. And what am I going to do about it? Am I really going to let this control me? And it helps on so many levels, with your emotions, with procrastination, with addiction, with compulsion, with all kinds of things, and Katie just said, she writes in her journal, I am enough at the end of each entry. I sometimes will write just like things I'm grateful for, because it's really important to be like mindful of what you're grateful for. And like, gratitude is like, it's a really good superpower for like escaping fear, and there are different journal exercises. But if you just complain a lot, like, that's fine too, whatever. Just like taking a mental shit, you just shit it out and be gone with it, So, but learning to cut yourself the emotional slack really helps, because so much of procrastination is based on fear of what other people think, and fear of doing it wrong, fear of not being good enough, right? For your work to face judgment. And the only way for your work to be good is to just do a ton of it. That's the only way. No one's just like, here's the fucking Mona Lisa, first painting I've ever done. No one is like that. That's just not how it happens. So you have to slog through doing a bunch of crap before you do good shit. That's inevitable, right? So, the only way to do that is to hit the fucking gas. Right? And stop thinking about it. Just hit the fucking gas. So it teaches you to hit the gas. The journaling teaches you to hit the gas. And you need to let yourself become uncomfortable. So you need to escape from those fears, and you need to develop grit, right? And grit comes from vision and from meaning. And all of that comes to me from writing things down, from examining my own thinking, from, through stream of consciousness and speed writing, through tapping into my like unconscious emotions. And because you surprise yourself all the time, when the faster you write, the better you do the exercise, and the faster the faster you write, the less censored you are, and the less you like stop. You're like, oh, I don't want to say that. What am I going to think of myself? Right? If you don't allow yourself that time, then it will come out, and you'll be able to really look at it. And fucking don't show it to everyone. I've burnt many a journal. Like, there's tons where I talked about all kinds of fucking shit that I just didn't want anyone to ever read. So I just burned it. You know, that's fine. Do that, right? You don't ever have to show people that. You don't ever have to show people you're halfway done tracks. You know, the waste paper basket is your friend, as Margaret Atwood says. You know, don't be afraid to like just, you know, let it come out. Feel free. You can always throw it out. You can always, so just why stop yourself? You know, because it's like stopping yourself is like that doesn't get shit done. That doesn't get your goals achieved. You know, you got to stop stopping and learn to just hit the fucking gas. And keeping a clear vision of what it is that what does your art mean to you? How is it why does it need you to make it? You know, what is it? Cuz you know, you're the world's leading fucking expert on being yourself. You're the world's leading expert on your emotions, on how you feel, on your take. You're the world's leading authority on your take. You know, and I remember one day I was at uni and I handed in a paper and I went into office hours to my prof. My prof was like, "You seem to know a lot about most people. Did you go to the Institute of Most People and get a degree in most peopleology?" I was like, "No." And he was like, "Tell me about your fucking thoughts. Tell me about your interpretation of this work. Tell me what it means to you. That's something you have expertise in. You don't need to go to school for that. But you can't just go around making claims about most people without any authority to back it up." And I was like, "Oh, shit." And it's like that with music, you know? Like, you are the world's leading fucking expert on your own take, you know? But if you're trying to do what someone else is doing, you know, if you're like, "Oh, I want to do something that's like that," but like Photoshop your face onto someone else's life, like, that's not how to approach it, you know? And the best art comes out when it's honest at some level. And it could be an honest artifice, you know, like drag. Drag is like inherently artifice, but drag is like more honest than, you know, the mask that we wear to fucking pretend to be normal and make it through the fucking, you know, make it through your day without, you know, being afraid of getting punched by some jock, you know? So it's fine to engage artifice, but that artifice should always be in pursuit of an authentic expression of your take, of your, you know, your life, your emotions, you know, and you know, you have a lot to say, you know, and I think a lot of people, especially people who kind of grew up with like a comfortable life, they're like, "Oh, you know, art is pain and suffering, and like, what is my music, you know, what do my fucking problems matter?" And it's like, you know, like some of it's like, you know, every problem is equally valid in the world of art, you know? Like, you can write a great song about, you know, an ant that couldn't catch up with the rest of the other ants and went down a river, you know, because when it's in a song, even the mundane becomes metaphor, you know? And like let's say you want to write a song about love. Love is like a big fucking concept, you know, and you're like, "Oh, what do I have to say about love? That's so fucking trite." But if you write a song about, you know, being in love and like watching a raindrop go down the window on a bus, and you're just like thinking of someone and you're seeing your face reflected in this raindrop and you're thinking about thinking her as the raindrop slides down the window of the bus gently and the city slides by the window. You could be describing something that is totally fucking factual and boring, but in the context of a song, that detail becomes profound, right? So, you know, your life is full of things you could write music about. You know, your life is full of fucking totally insane things. Like, you ever watch that? Like, I mean, as much as that problematic film with, you know, where like it totally makes it okay for Kevin Spacey to fucking have sex with an underage girl, which I'm like, how did they get away with that film? It's like a fucking Woody Allen movie or something. But American Beauty, when there's the one character who's like all obsessed with fucking paper bags in the wind, and or plastic bags. He's like filming plastic bags in the wind all day. that was really beautiful. And a couple of the lines about that were really like amazing, because there is so much everywhere around you all the time in your life. And, when you're focusing on music, like the most mundane things become totally profound because they've been recontextualized in songs. So don't feel like your life is small or you don't have any experience just because you haven't you didn't spend 10 years in prison or whatever. Like, you got tons of shit to write music about. The world is something to write music about, All right, so you're valid, your experiences are valid, your life is valid source material. It's okay to not know everything right away. These mistakes are normal. Procrastinating is normal. Don't say mean shit to yourself. You're not your emotions, you're not your thoughts, you're not your subconscious. You are your perspective. Share that fucking perspective with us in art. That's all we fucking want. Just be your naked fucking self. And we'll love you for it. Write it down, get it done, journal in the mornings. You'll be fucking fine.
When I was learning to make music, I always wished I had access to a professional musician whose brain I could pick whenever I had questions. YouTube is great if you know exactly what you're looking for, but the most important things to learn often remain unknown for years, holding back your progress and frustrating the process. Having a single, trusted source as a foundation for your learning is ideal, but music schools cost tens of thousands of dollars and offer no guarantee of overcoming writer's block. I wanted a complete source of information covering all aspects of being a music producer, not just what all the knobs and faders do. I wanted it to be affordable and I wanted it to be fun. So in 2017, I started the weekly download and I made it $5 a week for everything. Ever since then, for over 250 weekly downloads, I have created my library of Alexandria, like Netflix for producers, a collection of downloads, tutorials, interviews, templates, sounds, samples, and even philosophy and psychology lectures designed to cover every conceivable need of a modern music producer. You can systematically explore synthesis techniques, learn to name and create all the sounds you love, set up templates to run beat timers, start your own record label, take master classes in PR and release strategy, learn to DJ, learn to book tours, study music history, watch track walkthroughs from your favorite artists, build an incredible sound library, learn mixing and mastering, or just listen to a discussion of Nietzsche while you take a road trip. The weekly download has it all, and it gets one download better every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. When you join the weekly download, you're also joining an incredible community of musicians just like you. Awesome, talented people of all sorts who share a love of creativity and value collaboration over competition. The Discord goes off during the weekly download live, but it's also a place many bands, friends, and housemates have found each other. The happiness and productivity of our dojo members is living proof that the weekly download lives up to the hype. But if that's not enough, then check out what some torrent pirates had to say on a certain Russian website.
It's the best training deal on the internet.
Yeah, you might laugh, but you shouldn't be surprised. The weekly download is the best training deal on the internet. If you try it and you don't like it, you have 30 days to get a full refund, and I challenge anyone to try the arrangement exercise or do timer beats without getting over their imaginary case of writer's block. With a value literally hundreds of times the price of membership and a money-back guarantee, there is no reason not to check it out for yourself. The weekly download is like coming home. So pull up a seat because it's weekly download time.